Welcome to Rise Untold, where the stories behind the spotlight come alive. They said he died penniless. A man who once commanded the stage, who lit up Hollywood screens, who earned millions in a single breath of dialogue. And yet, when Richard Burton passed away in August of 1984 at just 58 years old, the whispers began. Burton had nothing left. He gave it all away. He died broke, but behind those rumors lay a truth far stranger. Richard Burton was born Richard Walter Jenkins, Jr. in Wales, the 12th of 13 children raised in poverty, with a coal miner father and a mother who died when he was still a boy. His start in life was anything but glamorous, but Burton had something that set him apart. A thunderous voice, a raw presence, and a mind hungry for Shakespeare, for art, for beauty. The world discovered him on the stage. He became one of the greatest interpreters of Shakespeare in modern history, and Hollywood soon followed, offering him riches beyond imagination. By the 1960s, Richard Burton was not just an actor, he was a global superstar. He was paid handsomely, sometimes $1 million per film. A staggering sum for the time. He lived in Swiss chalets, collected fine art, traveled the world. And of course his love life became as legendary as his career. Twice he married Elizabeth Taylor, in what became one of the most explosive, passionate, and public romances Hollywood had ever seen. But passion came with a price. Burton was generous to a fault, handing out money freely to friends, family, and lovers. At one point he gave $1 million to his third wife, Susie Hunt, just as part of a divorce settlement. He indulged in fine wines, luxurious homes, rare books, and priceless paintings. By the early 1980s, his health was fading. Heavy drinking had left scars, and his career, though still respected, was no longer at its peak. And so when he collapsed in his Swiss home in 1984, the cause, a massive intracerebral hemorrhage, seemed the tragic closing act of a man who had burned too brightly. The funeral was intimate. Friends mourned, and whispers began. Burton must have been broke. After the divorces, the art, the spending, he couldn't have had much left. To many, it seemed a fitting end for a man who lived extravagantly, loved passionately, and never counted the cost. But then came the will. As reported by the Sunday Mirror, documents revealed that Richard Burton did not, in fact, die penniless. His estate, carefully detailed, amounted to $4.58 million in 1984, the equivalent of around $10 million today. Not a fortune by Hollywood standards, perhaps, but far from nothing. The majority of it went to his widow, Sally Burton. Sally herself admitted that the world had it wrong. She said, "Everyone seems to be under the impression I am penniless. But that is not so." The truth was complicated. Burton's estate was spread across 3 countries. There was $2 million in a Bermuda bank account. Another $1 million in property. Close to $100,000 in investments. Around $380,000 in art and personal effects. Even $20,000 still coming in from old films. For friends who thought Burton had squandered everything, the news was a revelation. Some even called it modest. Others, like his brother Verdun, were shocked it wasn't higher, calling the figure ridiculous for a man of Burton's stature and earnings. But the story didn't end with numbers. Among Burton's treasures were priceless items, gifts, memories, legacies. A Picasso sketch that mysteriously vanished from his estate. For years it was unaccounted for, until it was discovered hanging in the home of Elizabeth Taylor, Burton's legendary ex-wife. His widow Sally, rather than fight, simply allowed it to remain there. It was as if that piece of art, like Burton's heart, belonged with Elizabeth all along. Another item, a manuscript by poet Dylan Thomas. Also disappeared from his estate, a reminder that sometimes the real wealth of a man lies not in numbers, but in the priceless fragments of culture and memory he leaves behind. So, did Richard Burton die penniless? No, but the truth was far more complex. He died with millions in the bank, art in his name, and the legacy of one of the greatest voices the stage and screen had ever known. Yet, at the same time, for a man who earned so much, who commanded so much attention, many were stunned at how little seemed to remain. Perhaps that is the tragedy of Richard Burton. He gave too freely, lived too loudly, loved too fiercely. His wealth was never just about numbers. It was in his words, his performances, his unforgettable presence. And maybe that's the real inheritance he left behind. Not the $48 million, not the Picasso sketch, not the estate spread across 3 countries, but the echo of a man whose voice, whose presence, whose contradictions still linger decades after his death. Richard Burton's life forces us to ask, what does it really mean to be rich? Is it the money in your bank account? The mansions you own? The priceless art that hangs on your wall? Or is it something far less tangible, something you cannot buy, cannot measure, cannot count? For Burton, wealth came in many forms. He rose from the soot and shadows of a coal mining village in Wales, a boy with little more than a dream, and carved his name into the brightest lights of Broadway and Hollywood. He possessed a voice that could shake the rafters of a theater and silence a crowded room. He built a career that inspired generations of actors. He loved recklessly, gave freely, lived loudly, and yes, he spent with abandon. He handed out fortunes, sometimes with nothing expected in return. He burned through money as if it were paper, but he burned through life the same way, with an intensity that left the world watching, gasping, unable to look away. So when people whispered that Richard Burton died penniless, maybe they missed the point. Because the man who left us in 1984 left more than numbers. He left questions about what really matters. He left the reminder that you can give everything away and still be remembered as one of the richest souls to walk this earth, because if Richard Burton could rise from nothing, just a boy from Wales, to become Hollywood's brightest star, if he could live a life of love and heartbreak, of fortune and ruin, of triumph and tragedy, and still be remembered not for what he hoarded, but for what he gave, then maybe the measure of our lives isn't in what we keep, but in what we share. And if he could give so much, risk so much, and still be called great, maybe you can too, because greatness has never truly been measured by the weight of gold or the size of a bank account. It has always been measured by what remains when the money is gone, when the headlines fade, when the spotlight goes dark. Maybe greatness isn't about dying with millions. Maybe it's about leaving behind something far greater, something no vault can store, no lawyer can divide, no journalist can calculate. It's about leaving a legacy, a story that continues to be told, an echo that refuses to fade. Richard Burton's legacy wasn't the dollar signs in his will. It was the power of his performances, the thunder of his voice, the passion of his love, and the generosity of his spirit. That's why, decades after his death, we still talk about him. Not as a man who left millions, but as a man who left meaning, and if he could do that, despite his flaws, his losses, his reckless spending, then maybe you can too. Maybe your story, your struggles, your voice, could become the echo someone else needs to rise.